Today I'm talking about, I've only got, well, a small part of an hour. I'm talking about the perception of the context of how we perceive mediums working with police. Later on there's obviously a longer workshop which we will be looking at murder cases, real murder cases, and it's quite heavy and emotional, so I would warn people of the extra sensitives who think that they can't handle some of the information that's going to come through. So for those people who are delicate, think about it. Because I'm human, we're all human, and even working the way I do, although spirit protects me and elevates me when I'm working, almost detaches me, I'm still human and a mother after all. So you are going to sense and feel somebody's pain in the traumatic time of life. Because I always say that we all experience loss in our lives, I think, because the majority of people here are wondering and seeking and searching about an afterlife. And you will find that when we lose people, this is what triggers off the search for most people. Because they're thinking, what's this life all about? Is there an afterlife? And quite that's a common ground. But when we lose people to illness and old age, it's almost acceptable because we know it is a process we have to go through. But you see, the different slant is when your child has been taken by the hands of somebody else, it's a different ball game. It's a total different emotions involved. But pain nevertheless. So, you know, you have to be very respectful and sensitive to what we're going to be talking about later on this afternoon. But, you know, this morning it's just giving you an insight of putting mediums in the correct context, because people dismiss some of the myths that you'll see in British press, that police will deny working with mediums. Although there is a clause within Scotland Yard in their policy, and it is, I can't quote the number because I forget sometimes, but if you did read the policy of Scotland Yard, it advises them not to use mediums or psychics, but we know that they do. But I always said that whatever police officer or detective that has arrived on my doorstep, it's because of their own doing. But apart from the first ever visit, which was a chief inspector's decision to send 2 men to visit, but obviously after that I get many visits, but obviously they come in disguise, incognito, plain clothes. I've had some strange experiences. And plus they will visit you sometimes pretending to be a client, and then it's up to spirit to say, I can see a blue uniform with you. And that's when their cover is blown. So, so yes, it does happen. And I think there has been a Welsh police force got penalised by the government for wasting, I think it was tens of thousands of pounds of following a lead by a psychic which didn't come to fruition. So they had their knuckles dropped. So you do occasionally get bad press to do with mediums involved with police. That's why they stay undercover. I know that if a policeman does use a medium, he will ask for confidentiality, obviously. Confidentiality with the case. I can only talk about the cases that I've been allowed to talk about and the ones I've been allowed to write about. Because obviously, you, out of sheer respect, you ask the family, first of all, the family's permission. And then obviously you ask the officer, do you mind if I mention it? Because people out there need to be educated about the spirit. So yes, those of, you know, so that I've been obviously a number of years now, I've collated a number of cases that I can publicly talk about. And with the you know, the endorsement of officers. So you see, when a medium goes to the scene of a crime, the key part, the element that they will be using to do with spirit, I know there's an element of psychicness, which is your intuitive thoughts, your sensing, your feeling, because you're going to be using everything. Your clairaudience, your clairsentient, and your clear-seeing, your clairvoyance. So, but in my experience, what I've found is the element that has been used, or shall we say spirit uses, is they present me with a connection first. The officer comes. Quite often they want to take you to a scene of a crime, although it's, you know, there's no trace of a crime that's held, so they'll take you to areas. And it'll be that common question. Tell me, you know, what you sense and feel here, if anything. And with spirit, it comes from a very high vibration of light, because that's when I have visions. And in all my murder cases, it has been visions. And some of the cases, it's just been pure visions. It's also accompanied by the spirit communicator, which is often the murder victim themselves. So when we visualise, I know we all have pictures, don't we? We've all experienced pictures in our minds, have we not?
Yes.
Yes? So, how does your pictures come? Can anybody, I want you to participate, because audience participation time is just wonderful, because I don't want to be doing all the talking, because this course is about you, and it's about your experience, it's about you sharing, and when we share, we educate each other. So, your experiences, how do they come when you're actually seeing a picture?
Very quick.
Quick?
Yeah.
It's a quickness?
Another picture after.
And can I say there's a reason for the quickness? Because my experience is I feel detached and elevated, so the emotions are not blocking, because it's usually the emotional impact comes later. That's when I get distraught and upset because of what the horrific scenes that I've seen, which is my human, my physical expression. But the flashing is for a purpose, because you can imagine if you're there for a long time looking at a scene at one picture, you are eventually, it's going to affect your physical body, not your spiritual mind. So the quickness is there for a purpose. So I say there's always a couple of seconds, just enough to see and then to give the information. Now, is it no, just tell me, anybody else like to tell me about their pictures?
I can tell the first time I had a picture, I had this picture and it was there and it was gone. And then when I was doing the demonstration, it was in a classroom. And when I was using that picture for the demonstrating that I was trying to do, I mentally put the picture back in my head, because to remember the picture, to see into the picture what I saw, I picked it up by my own mind so that I can remember the picture, remember what I saw. That has nothing to do with the spirit world. The first picture was the spirit world. But then you stored it in your physical brain. I stored it and picked it up to work with the picture.
Mum is very right. Are you referring to clairvoyance or are you referring to seership? Because they're two different things, aren't they?
Clairvoyance. Well, I call it my vision, you see, because if you think of my history, I've done something that's natural, and then words have come and people have put labels on me.
But are you moving your awareness into the future and into the past?
No, when you're at a scene, I'm talking specifically when you're at a scene of a crime, in my experience, it's a vision that's in front of me, yeah? It's usually in bright daylight, yeah. And I'm seeing what has happened at the scene, the energy, the thing that's happened. So it is the past, you're picking up on, it's almost like it's left a stain on the energy field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there used to be an old form of mediumship called seership, didn't there? Where
It's another label, isn't it?
where people, where Nostradamus had
Yeah, he was a
seership.
seer.
He had
That's
seership.
futuristic.
But people can take their awareness into the past and into the future.
That's right.
But it's slightly different to clairvoyance.
Well, mine is a combination, because if you remember me telling you about the case yesterday, I saw a future picture of the family on the steps with their hands up in the air, and that was a photograph months later, front page of the paper. That's seership, you're right. But there's a combination going on, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm sure
that's
there
why I
probably
said
is,
it's
yeah.
probably both. Yeah, you're right. You're right. And so yes, there's a reason. And the pictures are not distorted. And sometimes people say we don't dream in colour. I'm a lady that does dream in colour.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, that's a sensitivity. That's I think it's just an expression of your sensitivity. But these are just like watching a video recorder in front of you. But if you can imagine, you can see through it. I can see that table, but I could be having a vision. And the impressions could be here, but I could still see that table. It's like on top of cellophane. But it's for a few seconds. You pick up, and then you divulge the information. So what I'm trying to express is that visions is a key tool. And I think that's what the police understood how to express Angela and the way she was. Because they all talked about Angela and her visions. So that's how I tried to explain to them, because, you know, you've gone in and you're working with three skeptic detectives who didn't believe in all this rubbish. And you go in and you give them the forensic details, the injuries that was caused to the person, the whereabouts, where they were found lying, who had done it. But I think in this particular murder that you'll probably see this afternoon, because I have bought the DVD, you'll hear the detectives saying, well, forensics were telling us it was more than one person, but Angela came up with the exact numbers. And obviously, and then you've got the, told you the funny, well, I should say the slight humorous detective who didn't believe anything. He just believed what he saw. And that was his attitude. And you can smile at the fact that he's standing on a bridge and going, and this is where we found the safe in the canal, exactly where Angela had said. So that's his... To the logic mind, if you imagine that detectives work with hard facts and logic, they can't think outside that box, because if they went all hairy-fairy, as they said, they would be ridiculed by their counterparts. So we had to look at facts and logic. And they put me into so many factual boxes, then all of a sudden they went... And it's like a little chink of light went on in their minds. And spirit is light, so spirit had entered them to convert them, to make them think, well, there's got to be something else. But that's the beauty. But visions is a key tool, and I mean a key tool. We don't exactly solve crimes. What we do, quite often, is you go in, they tell you no information whatsoever, they just want your presence there. And they may have put a file on the table, and they may allow you to put a hand on it, although it's turned over, you can't see the name, everything is hidden. And with the hand on the file, you put your full trust and faith after you've said your prayers. You put your full trust and faith in spirit. And then the information, and you build a profile of what's in that file, a profile of what's happened. And but you see, the key tool is the visions. That's what I'm trying to stress. You may use your feelings or your thoughts. You may, as you say, use the clairvoyance and the seership. But usually it's a combination. But for police to bow down, it's rare. That's what I'm trying to say. and it's all undercover, most of it. It's done in the strictest of confidence. But you will find that there was a case, funny enough, whereas there was no spirit intervention, and I don't mean a personal spirit intervention. I did not actually pick up on the woman's spirit, but I could see the events that led to her death. So that's coming from a higher level of spirit communication beyond your God. Because I always say, if you want to connect with spirit, the number one principle of spiritualism is I believe in God and the brotherhood of man. And I always say that your spirituality is like climbing Kilimanjaro. You want to reach the peak first, don't you? That's your ambition. So if Godhead is at the peak of this mountain, your spirit guide, your angelic realms, your knowledge of other spirit communication is the slopes. And I always say, why hang about the slopes when you can go to the peak? So that's why all my advice to you is you go to the peak first, and the understanding of the hierarchy of realms will fall into place. And that's why I always say prayer, meditation, before you work. Ask your guides to come in, because you want every help, don't you? Before I remember, rolling that car onto that car park of that pub, and I'm in turmoil, and I'm begging God, and I'm going, come on, and then I'm listing everybody in the spirit world that I know. Come and help me, come and help me. These people need to know, please, God, give them an answer. And I always say that. Give these people not what they want to know, what they need to know. Because mediums do not profess to know everything. We can only give what we receive. We are just channels. We are their instrument. We are God's instrument. And I always say, please God, give these people what they need to know. And it is a need, and God knows the need. And so in my cases, you will find that there are detectives who do believe in God because they've brought in some religion of some sort, and those who are just completely blind. But I do know, to tell you the truth, I do know a few psychic detectives, and I mean, not me, that's a label. I mean, real police officers who douse. I know a dowser, and he was a top man in police, and he's the one that I talked to Snippet about yesterday, where I was taken to a housing estate, the long day we spent. And the beauty of it was Doris Stokes came through at the end, because the latter part of that day was I was taken to yet another, because you'll find that murders are very popular in woods, or shall we say they dispose of their bodies in woodlands. It's one of the most popular areas to bury a body, basically. But we see what I learnt from him. He physically built, he was a profiler. He would build what they call a profiler of the culprit, the person that's committed the crime. And of course they get all their information together. But to listen to this man talk was an education in itself. To spend the whole day with a man who had a genius mind in his profession. He taught me a lot of things, how to track, what to do when they do track bodies, what to look for. Because we spent hours, I mean, my reputation, I've been in woods with men, you know what I mean? It's like, my reputation's gone short. My children phone me and they go, oh, you're not in the woods again, are you, Mum? You know, and it's, yeah, they see the funny side of it, bless them. But with that experience, it was a very profound one. And the beauty of it was the very end of the day. I was feeling that my guides had left me and I was becoming emotionally drained. And he could see by the look on my face because I'd been there 10 hours. And he just said, one more place I want to take you, one more. It was always one more. You know, so to say, he was encouraging me to, you know, stay on that vibration. And we entered we entered some woods and there was a concrete block as we entered, and I looked at him and I said, you see this concrete block? I said, I think it's significant, something to do with this, I don't know. And he said, it's significant to where I'm taking you. So he took me and we went into these woods and it got darker and darker. And with the backdrop of a November, you know, getting on for 5 o'clock in November, it was going really dark. And I'd never seen such a vision. And I think it was shown to me because of the dusk that was coming. It seemed more illuminated. And out of the thousands of trees, there was this another concrete block at the bottom of a foot of a tree. And I said, see that concrete block? And I looked up at the tree, and I found a boy hanging on the tree, basically. And I said, Bob, there's a boy hanging in that tree. And then the interrogation went on. Then he's, oh yes, you're telling me you can see a boy hanging in that tree? Yes. He said, tell me, what colour's the rope? And I said, it's blue. He said, tell me anything else you can tell me. He said, what's he wearing? I said, striped t-shirt, jeans, trainers. I said, his name's Mark. And then he said, anything else? And all of a sudden, I had another vision. And there was a man at the side, winching the body up. And I said, there's a man there. And I realised then that this young man had been murdered, then strung up to make it look like a suicide. And that was the information. And he said, oh yes. He said, what does that man look like? And I said, well, he's very well disguised. He's got khaki gear on, like, you know, an old soldier. I says, but there's a television character from the can you remember 1970s? Crossroads, Benny.
Oh,
yeah?
Absolutely, yeah.
Remember Benny in Crossroads? He was a character that wore a hand-knitted woolly hat, yeah? And my words to Bob, because he came from that generation, my words to Bob, I just went, Bob, I said, he's wearing a hand-knitted hat just like Benny out at Crossroads. And he looked at me and he went, I've got a picture of him wearing that hat. He's our prime suspect. And, but anyway, the information flowed. I started to build a picture of this guy, the white van he drove, the fact that he'd spent time in the Navy. He was a bit of a loner. I even pinpointed the pub where he drank called the Trooper. I said, there's a pub called the Trooper. And Bob's like this, nodding his head, yes. Then, and it stopped. I realised I was aware that my guides had gone. And I went, that's enough now, Bob. I said, they've gone, yeah. I said, I've done what I can, okay. And he said, I've got to tell you something. He said, I had Doris Stokes working on this case in the 1980s. She died in 81, 3, something like that. She said, and you're telling me exactly what she told me, but if not, a little bit more, giving the police more confirmation. But you see the beauty of it, and I went, it's all to do, I said, with this blue rope, because there's 2 knots on a ring. And I said, to me, I feel that's very important, so my guide said. And he said, it was the knotting in the rope that reopened the case, because these couple of boys, because we're talking of a serial killer here, these couple of boys, or should we say 2 of the boys that I discovered that day, well, should I say I discovered 4 boys actually, but there's 2 boys are still missing. But the 4 suspect boys, they were all sort of labelled suicide until they realised that the knots in the rope were farm knots, and these boys weren't aware of any farming or had no attachment to, and it was because the guy had worked on farms and he would have known the farm knottings that they use. And I know what it is, what he's talking about was you do like a slip knot, one left over right, right over left, but the tail of it, farmers, when you've got it around the neck of a cow, the tail of it was usually tucked back under, so the animal can't pull at the loose and set itself free. And obviously these were city boys. They'd lived in the city, they didn't know anything about farms, and that was the new evidence, and Spirit came along and confirmed it. So, and all I got at the end of the day was a big hug, and just said, thank you, it took somebody really special to do what you did, blah, blah, blah. And that's all you get, because there was a question yesterday saying, how much do they pay you? And I went, what? I said, if an officer comes knocking on your door and said, excuse me, would you know anything about this local murder? You're not going to go, well, pay me, then I'll tell you. You're not going to say that. You're going to do it out of a sense of duty. There's a sense of duty and responsibility. And that's what you do. You just do your duty. They want your help, you give your help, because the whole essence of mediumship, I always say for anybody that wants to be in mediumship, it's the want to serve. That's what you've got to have within your personality, within your soul. You want to serve. But another tool to do with cases, quite often, you're given photographs. Right, so a photograph, I'm not scientific. A photograph, but spiritually, how I've worked this out in my little mind as a child growing up. A photograph, if your soul is in here, I call it soul because I like to call it soul because that's what psyche means. Psyche is Greek for soul, okay? Soul, spirit, the same thing, okay? In your soul starts in here and it exudes out around your body into what they call this energy field, right? So you've got this camera being invented, and what it does, it aims at the camera, makes a flashing movement which traps the light onto the cellophane. It is projected from your body back onto the cellophane, and that creates a photograph. So if you can imagine, it's trapped part of the energy of the spirit onto cellophane. And that's why photographs to the spirit world are very important. Quite often loved ones will come through and they will produce photographs in front of me saying, oh, I can see a little girl, and it's hanging above your settee, 2 little girls in gingham dresses. And I go, oh, that's my mum's favourite school picture of me. And, you know, and it's important, photographs. Quite often spirit will come through and go, you haven't got a photograph of mum up, can you put it up, please? Because what it is, when you've got a photograph, especially of a loved one in spirit, when you walk past it, you glance over, you've sent up a thought. You send up the thought, it draws on the energy. And there's a communication that's going. But if they're stuck away in a drawer, they're not receiving the amount of communication that they like to. So I always say photographs are important, but they're also important in murder cases. Because all they sometimes do is there's a photograph. And then they'll confuse you by giving you another or maybe several photographs. And they're the red herrings, okay? And you've got to go along and pick who the murder victim is. Right, so just do that, just do further confirmation for them. It's like you don't want this person wasting our time. So you'll go along and you'll feel. And you'll look into the eyes, because the eyes in some photographs, and I always get, the eyes are the windows to the soul, and there is a truth with that. I don't care what you say, because that's the most exposed organ. Spirit is attached to the physical body in this area, but it leaves the top of the head in the process of the transition of what we call death. As we know, there's no such thing as death. But photographs are mega important. You can tell a lot by a photograph. What I always say is you hold on to a photograph, you look into the eyes, because it's as if the eyes talk to you. And you can gain a lot of information by looking at other people's eyes, because we know that's the indicator to whether what we feel and what we're sensing. We show our personality through our eyes, and we show our psychicness, our raw soul here. So yeah, you quite often, as I say, you're given photographs, and the photograph talks to you. And that's why I say that it's the person in the photograph talking to you. I know it's projected from spirit as that, but you see, spirit will give you what you relate to, and it will show you what you relate to. So if I think, photographs are talking to me, the photograph will talk. because you can just glare into the eyes and you can sense and feel information. And I do like a photograph, anything. But you see, when I'm saying is, it's not necessarily the deceased loved one that communicates in murder cases. It's the clairvoyance, the seership, and an element of your guides, and maybe a loved one. Because if there is something that connects with that person to someone you know, or a loved one you know, then you look at something, oh, that reminds me of so-and-so who I've got in the spirit world. You're actually calling upon them. They're helping you because there's that link. You know, when you go about life and you meet people and you've all gone through similar pathways, or you find out you've had a number of experiences the same, you're making that connection for a purpose, because it's confirmation that you've come from the same soul group. You've come to the earth to do a similar journey. And that's what it's all about.